Have you ever missed a place you've never been? Not homesick for a house. Not nostalgic for a childhood memory. Something older than that. A pull toward somewhere you can't name, can't point to on a map, can't even describe without sounding a little insane. You feel it in crowded rooms. You feel it at 2 a.m. when the world goes quiet and something in your chest aches like it's waiting for a phone call that never comes. I'm not going to tell you that's nothing. I'm not going to tell you that's just anxiety or a chemical imbalance and leave it there. Because there's an old teaching, buried, argued over, nearly erased, that says your soul came from somewhere specific. Not a vague heaven. A structured, layered place with a name. The Pleroma. And by the end of this video, you're going to know which of its 7 levels your soul actually came from. You're going to test it yourself. Right here. Right now. Stay with me. This gets strange fast. I remember the first time I read the word Pleroma. It wrecked my whole week. I couldn't shake it. I kept turning it over like a stone in my pocket. Here's what it means stripped down, the fullness. The total, undivided field of divine light that existed before anything split apart. Before matter. Before time. Before up here and down there ever became separate ideas. 2nd century teacher Valentinus, one of the most detailed mapmakers of this cosmology, a man who took a scattered mystical idea and turned it into an actual structured system, described the Pleroma as layer after layer of divine emanation, each one a little further from the original light, each one a little more textured, a little more distinct. You were part of that fullness once. That's the claim. Not metaphorically. Actually. And I don't think this is myth. I know how that sounds. But I think it's memory, old, buried, distorted by centuries of retelling, but memory all the same. The ache you feel at 2 a.m. isn't random. It's a signal bouncing back from somewhere you used to belong. The further a soul travels from that original fullness, the more it forgets. And forgetting doesn't feel like forgetting. It feels like homesickness with no address. Here's a question that used to bother me for years. If the Pleroma is the fullness, complete, whole, undivided, why would it need levels at all? Doesn't fullness mean one thing, not 7? The old teachers answered this with the idea of eons, emanations, pairs, layers of divine expression that came out of the original source the way light comes out of a flame without the flame losing anything. Nothing is subtracted. Something is just expressed differently at each distance. Not punishment. Not a fall from grace in the way you've probably heard it before. Differentiation. The Pleroma didn't break. It unfolded. And here's where I'll give you my honest opinion, not just the historical version. I think the number 7 keeps showing up across totally unrelated traditions. 7 heavens, 7 chakras, 7 days, 7 layers of the underworld in stories that never touched each other. Not because ancient people liked round numbers. I think 7 maps onto something real in consciousness itself. A structure. A resonance. Something too consistent to be coincidence. Each of the 7 levels isn't a place with walls. It's a frequency. A temperature your soul carries even now, buried under decades of forgetting, under school and jobs and 100 distractions. You're about to walk down through all 7. And somewhere in that walk, one level is going to feel less like information and more like recognition. Picture this. It's 3 a.m. Somebody is standing outside their front door in the cold, arms crossed, not really sure why they walked out here. The house behind them is warm. Everyone inside is asleep. There's no emergency. Nothing is wrong. And still, they're standing there, looking up at a sky they can't actually see much of because of the streetlights, feeling a pull in their chest they can't explain to anyone without sounding unstable. It isn't sadness exactly. It's closer to waiting. Like something is supposed to arrive, or someone is supposed to come find them, and they've been standing at this same invisible doorway their entire life without knowing it. That feeling has a name in the old teachings. It's called the memory of distance, the soul quietly measuring how far it's traveled from where it started. If you've ever stood somewhere like that, physically or just in your own mind, that wasn't confusion. That was your soul checking its coordinates. And the level you're about to recognize as yours in the next few minutes is usually the level tied directly to that exact feeling. Level 1, the source flame. Some of you already know you're not from down here. Not fully. You've known it since you were a kid and adults called you old soul like it was a compliment, when really it felt more like a diagnosis. This is the source flame, the level closest to the Pleroma itself, barely differentiated from the original light. Souls from this level don't do well with small ambition. Money, status, the normal ladder, none of it satisfies for long, and that used to make you feel broken. It isn't. You're wired for direct knowing instead of belief. You don't need someone to convince you something is true. You just know it, the way you know your own name, and explaining how you know is nearly impossible. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who spent his life mapping the unconscious mind and the recurring symbols inside it, spent decades circling this exact register in his own inner work, chasing something he could feel but never fully cage in language. The test marker for this level is simple: an unbearable loneliness around ordinary goals, paired with moments of certainty so sharp they scare you. If that's you, you're not broken. You're just close to the flame. Level 2, the architect layer. You know this one by the headache behind your eyes when you try to explain your own thoughts to someone who isn't built the same way. The architect layer is the level of structure, pattern, law. Souls here are drawn, almost against their will, toward blueprints. Sacred geometry. Systems that explain how everything fits together, whether that's physics, philosophy, or the invisible architecture behind a belief system. You don't just want to know that something is true. You need to know why and how the parts connect, and you'll lose sleep chasing that connection down. People from this level often get mistaken for cold or overly analytical. You're not cold. You're just carrying a level of the Pleroma that expresses itself through structure instead of emotion first. Test marker: an obsession with how things are built, spiritually, mentally, mechanically, and a quiet frustration when other people are satisfied with surface answers. Level 3, the voice layer. There's a particular ache that comes from saying the right words and still watching them land wrong. That's the signature of the voice layer. Souls from this level carry the Pleroma's expression through language, teaching, writing, speaking, even singing. You feel almost cursed with the need to be understood, and it hurts more than it should when people mishear you, because on some level you know you're not just failing to communicate. You're failing to transmit something important. This level produces the natural teachers, the writers who can't stop revising, the people who lie awake rehearsing conversations that already happened, wishing they'd said it better. Test marker: a disproportionate ache around being misunderstood, and a compulsive need to keep refining how you say things until they finally feel true. Level 4, the mirror layer. This is the level that confuses people the most, including me for a long time. The mirror layer is the level of empathy, so deep it stops being a personality trait and becomes a kind of leak. Souls here absorb what's around them, other people's moods, other people's pain, as if there's no wall separating your feelings from everyone else's feelings. You walk into a room, and you know something is wrong before anyone says a word. You cry at things that shouldn't make you cry, and then feel embarrassed about it, when really you were just carrying someone else's weight for a second without meaning to. The danger here is real, and I won't soften it. Souls at this level can lose themselves completely, mistaking absorption for love, and burning out trying to fix what was never theirs to fix. Test marker: chronic emotional overabsorption, and a lifelong struggle to tell your own feelings apart from everyone else's. Level 5, the warrior layer. Some of you have been called too intense your whole life. Too blunt. Too much. The warrior layer carries a very different expression of the Pleroma, not soft, not diplomatic. This is the level built for conflict, protection, and breaking cycles that other people are too afraid to touch. Souls here don't experience anger as a flaw to manage. Anger at this level is fuel, sacred even when it's aimed correctly. You were never meant to be quiet in the face of things that are wrong. That restlessness in your chest when you see injustice isn't a character defect. It's your assignment. The world tends to mislabel this level as difficult. I'd argue it's one of the most necessary levels there is, because without it, nothing ever gets defended. Test marker: a low tolerance for injustice, a history of being called too much, and a body that runs hot with a kind of righteous restlessness you've never fully explained to anyone. Level 6, the builder layer. There's a quieter itch some of you carry, the need to fix, construct, provide, stabilize. Not for recognition, just because something in you can't stand watching things stay broken or unfinished. The builder layer is where spiritual ideas stop floating and start becoming real. This is the level that turns philosophy into a business plan, a belief into a family structure, a vision into something you can actually hold in your hands. You might not think of yourself as spiritual at all. You think of yourself as practical. But practicality at this level is the spiritual expression. You're the one anchoring higher ideas into the physical world, so they don't just stay pretty thoughts. Test marker: a compulsive need to build, stabilize, and provide, and a quiet discomfort with ideas that never turn into anything tangible. Level 7, the root layer. And then there's the level nobody wants to admit they're from, because it sounds the least special. The root layer is closest to matter, closest to the body. Souls here are the ones who keep everyone else alive and fed while the other levels are off having their visions and their revelations. You're the one who remembers to pay the bill, who shows up, who endures. I want to be honest with you here, because I think this level gets underestimated constantly, including by people who carry it. This is not a lesser level. The Pleroma needs an anchor point, or none of the higher expressions have anywhere to land. Without the root, nothing holds. Everything floats away. If you've spent your life feeling less spiritual than the people around you talking about visions and downloads and cosmic missions, while you're just quietly, stubbornly keeping things standing, that endurance is your sacred function. Not a consolation prize. The foundation everything else stands on. Test marker, deep physical endurance, a grounded pragmatism, and a quiet resentment towards spiritual people who never seem to actually do anything. Here's where you stop listening and start checking. I'm going to walk through this fast, and I want you to notice which questions land in your gut instead of your head, because your gut already knows the answer before your mind finishes the sentence. Do you feel an unbearable loneliness around small, ordinary goals, paired with flashes of certainty you can't explain? That's the source flame. Do you get headaches trying to explain the structure behind your own thoughts, and feel unsatisfied by surface-level answers? That's the architect layer. Do you ache, physically ache, when your words land wrong, and rehearse conversations obsessively afterward? That's the voice layer. Do you absorb other people's emotions so completely you can't always tell which feelings are yours? That's the mirror layer. Do you run hot with restlessness at injustice, and get labeled too intense for simply refusing to stay quiet? That's the warrior layer. Do you feel a constant itch to build, fix, provide, and stabilize, uncomfortable with ideas that never become something real? That's the builder layer. Do you carry deep physical endurance, quiet pragmatism, and a low-grade frustration with people who talk spiritually but never actually do anything? That's the root layer. I'll be honest with you, when I first tested myself against this, I got it wrong. I wanted to be the source flame. Everyone wants to be the source flame. But the level that actually fit me was the voice layer, and admitting that felt like losing an argument with my own ego. This test isn't about which answer sounds the most impressive. It's about which one made your stomach drop a little when you heard it. That drop is recognition. That's your soul, quietly raising its hand. Here's the part one actually care about most. Knowing your level isn't a personality label you slap on for fun. It's a compass. It tells you exactly what kind of homesickness you're allowed to stop apologizing for. If you're a root soul, you stop feeling guilty for not having visions. If you're a mirror soul, you stop mistaking absorption for weakness. If you're a warrior soul, you stop shrinking your intensity to make other people comfortable. And here's the piece that ties the whole thing together, the part the old teachers came back to again and again. Every level, no matter how far it's traveled, eventually folds back into the one Pleroma it came from. The separation was never permanent. It was never meant to be. It was distance, not divorce. You didn't lose your place in the fullness. You're just remembering your way back to it, one recognition at a time. If you're still here with me, you already know which level found you tonight. I'd genuinely like to know. Drop it in the comments. Not because I need the engagement, but because I think there's something powerful about a room full of strangers quietly recognizing each other across 7 very old layers of light. If this stirred something in you, stay close. There's a place beyond the 7 levels that almost nobody talks about, an 8th position the old teachers called the Ogdoad, and I think it explains something even stranger about where all of this ends up. Until then, you were never as lost as you felt. You were just far from home. And now you know exactly how far.